Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I am Rohaila Lagindab, and today I will be discussing to you about the Jabidah Massacre. So, the Jabidah Massacre is considered one of the most controversial and politically sensitive events in the Philippine history. It involved the execution of Muslim military trainees by government forces on Corregidor Island in March 1968. Although the factual details of the incident remain disputed, however, its impact on Philippine society, particularly among Muslim communities in Mindanao, is profound and widely acknowledged. This conflict is important to study because, again, it marked a turning point in the relationship between the Philippine government and the Moro people. Because this incident intensified feelings of injustice, marginalization, and mistrust, ultimately contributing to the rise of organized resistant governments. It also played a crucial role in shaping future peace processes, including the establishment of the Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, or ARM, and later the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, or the BARM. So, for us to understand this further, let's segue to the background of conflict behind Jabidah Massacre. So, again, the Jabidah Massacre, it took place in March 1968 on Corregidor Island, a former military stronghold located at entrance of Manila Bay. So, the incident is closely connected sa secret military plan na tinatawag na Operation Merdeka, which was initiated by the Philippine government during the time of former President Ferdinand Marcos Sr. to infiltrate ang Sabah, Malaysia. And remember, ang mga tao sa Sabah, mga Muslim yun lahat sila. Lahat yun sila Muslims. So under this operation, yung tinatawag na Operation Merdeka, mga recruit doon ay mga young Muslim men, primarily mga Tausog and Sama from Sulu and nearby areas. Sila ang mga recruited and sila yung mga recruited na gina-train as commandos. Tinatawag na mga commandos. So they were promised na bibigyan sila ng stable income, magte-training lang sila. However, as the training progressed, akala nila magkakaroon sila ng magandang kinabukasan, but opposite ang nangyari. Naging harsh ang living condition nila, inadequate food, lack of proper compensation, and unclear communication regarding their mission. Kasi hindi nila alam na kaya sila gina-train kasi sila ang gagamitin or lalaban para i-infiltrate ang Sabah, Malaysia. So nagkaroon ng tension talaga nung nalaman nila yon. Kasi ang papatayin nila ay kapwa mga Muslim sa Sabah. Kapwa nila mga Muslim sa Sabah. So nag-protest sila na hindi sila tutuloy sa mission na yon. So ang nangyari, para hindi malaman ang secret mission na ito or the Operation Merdeka, ang nangyari, the Armed Force of the Philippines secretly killed those trainees. Pinatay silang lahat. Again, para hindi malaman sa bansang Pilipinas na may planong i-infiltrate ang Sabah, Malaysia. So, isa lang ang tanging nakatakas sa mga trainees na iyon. Only Jibin Arula. So, siya yung nakapagsabi or nakapagkwento sa totoong nangyari. So, during at the time, nagkaroon ng political controversy sa administrasyon ni Ferdinand Marcos. So, let's segue to the types of conflict na na-encounter sa Jabidah Massacre. So, the first one is power conflict, diba? So, this situation clearly demonstrates a power conflict. The imbalance of power made it difficult for the recruits to assert their concerns or seek justice. At the same time, a value conflict emerged when the recruits were faced with the possibility of attacking fellow Muslims in Sabah. So, this created a moral dilemma as their religious beliefs conflicted with the orders given by the state. Their refusal to continue the mission can be understood as defense of their values and identity. And last one is a cultural conflict was also present, rooted in the historical divide between the predominantly Christian central government and the Muslim population of Mindanao. So differences in the religion identity, and historical experience contributed misunderstanding and mistrust.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. So let's proceed to causes of conflict. The first one is immediate causes. So these were the sparks that triggered the recruits' mutiny immediately before the massacre. The first one is unpaid salaries, which the recruits had not received their promised pay, causing financial distress. So the second one is poor living conditions. The training camp on corregidor lacked basic necessities, so leading to physical exhaustion and resentment. So the third one is refusal to continue mission. This was the point of no return, which upon learning that they were to fight the other Muslims. So the recruits staged a petition or mutiny. So the last one is the rising tension with military. So this was the lack of communication and heavy handedness of the officers that turned a labor dispute into a fatal confrontation rather. So these are directly triggered the conflict. The second one is root causes. These are the underlying foil that had been building up for generations. The first one is historical marginalization of Muslims. This was the long history rather of the Bangsamoro people being treated as second-class citizens in their own land. The second one is poverty and lack of opportunities. Without economic prospects in Mindanao, the military was one of the few ways for young men to find work, making them exploitable. The third one is political exclusion. This was the feeling that the Moro people had no voice in the halls of power in Manila. So the last one is weak governance and mistrust. This was the total lack of faith in the Philippine government's ability to protect the interest of the Muslim minority. So these are the created long-term tension before the incident. The second one is the ABC of conflict. This framework helps us to understand how the internal states and external actions of the parties involved, which is the Moro recruits and the Philippine government, interacted to create a crisis. So the first one is attitude, which is the fear, anger, and mistrust. So the A or attitude refers to the psychological state. For the Moro recruits, fear arose when they realized the true nature of their mission, which is the Operation Merdeka, which involved infiltrating Sabah. Anger and mistrust toward the military leadership peaked when their basic needs were ignored, leading to a breakdown in the relationship between the soldiers and their superiors. So the second one is behavior, which is the protest and violent response. The B or behavior rather refers to the physical actions. The recruits exhibited behavior through a protest, which is refusing to continue the mission. The military's response was a violent escalation, which is the massacre itself, which was an attempt to silence the recruits and cover up the clandestine operation. The third one is contradiction, which is the government goals versus recruits' rights and beliefs. The C or the contradiction is the core incompatibility. The Philippine government's goal was a covert geopolitical move to reclaim Sabah. This contradicted to the recruits' rights to fair treatment and, crucially, their religious and cultural beliefs, as they were being asked to fight against fellow Muslims in Sabah. The last one is the conflict tree analysis. The conflict tree visualizes the massacre not as a random event, but as a structure with deep origins and visible consequences. So the first one is roots, which is the poverty, marginalization, and discrimination. These are the structural causes. Long before 1968, the Muslim population in Mindanao felt neglected by the central government in Manila. Poverty and a lack of socio-political representation made young Moro men vulnerable to recruitment for high-risk operations. The second one is the trunk, which is the Jabidah Massacre. The trunk represents the main event, which is the Jabidah Massacre. The massacre is the focal point where the roots of discontent manifested into a visible historical tragedy. It is the solid evidence of the breakdown in a relationship between the state and the Bangsamoro people. So the last one is the branches, which is the aftermath. These are the outcomes or fruits of the event. The first one is a rise of Moro nationalism. The massacre served as a rallying cry, turning regional grievance into a unified national identity. The second one is formation of the MNLF, which is the Moro National Liberation Front. It directly lead to the birth of the Moro National Liberation Front, which is the MNLF. So the third one is armed conflict. So it sparked decades of war in Mindanao. The last one is creation of autonomous region in Muslim Mindanao and Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. So which the eventual political autonomy BARM is a direct long-term branch stemming from the need to resolve the conflict that Jabida ignited. Lastly, I am Siham G. Saadudin. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good day, everyone, especially to our respected professor and dear classmates. I am Rihanna Diamla, and I am the last presenter from our group. My assigned part in this report is about the forms of violence, peace analysis, solutions or recommendations, and the conclusion of our case analysis entitled The Jabidah Massacre. In this part of the discussion, I will explain the different forms of violence present in the conflict, analyze the concept of peace in relation to the incident, and present possible solutions and lessons that can help promote lasting peace and understanding. Without further ado, let me begin with the forms of violence. So in this slide is the forms of violence. The Jabidah massacre shows different forms of violence that affected not only the victims but also the relationship between the government and Moro communities. First is direct violence. This refers to the alleged killing of the Muslim trainees on Corregidor Island. It is considered direct violence because it involved physical harm and loss of lives. According to the report, violence was allegedly used after the Chinese protested and refused to continue the mission. Second is structural violence. This can be seen in the long-standing problems experienced by Muslim communities, such as poverty, inequality, lack of opportunities, and underdevelopment in Mindanao. These conditions created feelings of exclusion and injustice for many years. Third is cultural violence. This includes discrimination, prejudice, and negative stereotypes against Muslims. These attitudes helped justify unfair treatment and strengthened mistrust between the government and the Moro people. These forms of violence are connected with one another and became major factors that contributed to conflict in Mindanao. So, in this slide is the peace analysis. Now, let us move to peace analysis. The conflict can be understood through the concepts of negative peace and positive peace. Negative peace means that the immediate violence stopped, but the deeper issues were still unresolved. Although the killings ended, justice, accountability, and trust were still lacking. Because of this, many Moro communities continued to feel marginalized and unheard. On the other hand, positive peace focuses on solving the root causes of conflict. Efforts toward positive peace were later seen through negotiations and the establishment of autonomous regions such as ARM and eventually BARM. These developments aimed to promote self governance, inclusion, and long term peace in Mindanao. However, challenges such as poverty, inequality, and political instability still continue today. This shows that true peace is not only about ending violence, but also about achieving justice, development, and unity among people. So, in this slide is the solutions or recommendations. To address the conflict and prevent similar incidents in the future, several solutions and recommendations can be considered. First is the official recognition of the Jabidah Massacre. Acknowledging the suffering of the victims is important in promoting healing and historical understanding. Second is transitional justice and accountability. Proper investigations, documentation, and possible reparations can help provide justice for the victims and their families. Third is strengthening inclusive governance, especially in the Bangsamoro region. Muslim communities should have meaningful participation in political decision making so that their voices and concerns will be properly represented. Another important recommendation is continuous peace dialogue and education. Promoting understanding and reducing prejudice can help rebuild trust between communities and the government. Lastly, economic development in Mindanao is very important. Providing better education, employment, and social services can help address poverty and other structural conditions that contribute to conflict. So, in this slide is the conclusion. So, to conclude, the Jabidah Massacre remains an important lesson in Philippine history. It reminds us of the consequences of abuse of power, lack of transparency, and neglect of minority rights. The incident did not only affect the victims and their families, but also contributed to long term conflict and mistrust in Mindanao. The case also teaches us that lasting peace cannot be achieved without justice, accountability, inclusivity, and respect for human rights. Although efforts such as the establishment of ARM and BARM have helped promote peace, there are still many challenges that need to be addressed. Overall, the Jabidah Massacre teaches us the importance of understanding history, respecting diversity, and working together to build a peaceful and united society. So I think that would be all for our report, and thank you for listening.